you staying with mates tonight, or are you back at the hotel?
Back at a little motel that I was at last night. Yeah.
Oh, nice. We're good. We're live.
Great.
Jeremy ELWOOD.
Hello again.
Good. Oh, gosh, again.
This is strangely familiar.
Hey, man. How are you?
I'm good, Pat. How are you?
I'm actually really good, and I'm really thankful for you to come in and say good day. You know what? I was thinking last night as I lay in bed, you and me go back to just after the 90s. Because we started at Theatre Sports Auckland.
Yeah, right.
We had a transition over. Yep. You were coming in just as I was coming out to Theatre Sports Auckland. Like maybe only one or two gigs.
Yeah, I didn't do much stuff with them, so it would have been a really brief period.
I remember
but that'd be right.
Yeah, and that would have been to Auckland, 98, 99, 2000. Yep. That's nearly 20 years.
Yeah, I know. Oh, God, don't say that.
Holy mackerel. So it's really lovely to have you back again.
Yeah, nice. Thanks.
And it's really nice to see you. Since I've moved to Dunedin, you've stayed in Auckland, we've been less in contact or less seeing each other, certainly. But your life's got really interesting of recent times. People probably mostly know you either for your stand-up comedy or for 7 Days. Yep. That would be fair? That's mostly for 7 Days now?
It's probably the most recognisable. I mean, that's the one thing. I mean, they'll probably know that. I mean, I was out in Dunedin last night, actually, and there are a lot of people going, waving and pointing, but the thing they yell is 7 Days.
Right.
They don't yell, stand up. So,
because you're already walking.
Yeah, that's right.
And so you're not... So obviously, JC, Di, and Paul are kind of the captains.
Yep.
There's a layer of you guys. I'm thinking of Ursula, you, and some other guys who are kind of first 15, so to speak.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I don't know how official that is, but yeah, if you watch the program, there's a whole bunch of us who are on more regularly than others. Yeah. And that has changed over the years. There's been a whole bunch of new young faces coming through this year, particularly young women. They've been really pushing to try and have at least one, but usually two relatively new women on the show every week. So that's kind of cut back a little bit on the amount that I do. Yeah. But yeah, I guess you could say that. Me, Ben Hurley, Ursula, Josh Thompson. Yeah. There's a few.
Yeah. We were joking today that for people who have watched the podcast before, we're in a new location today. We're still filming at Petri Dish, but where we regularly film is busy today. Zach Galifianakis does Between Two Ferns.
I did think that when I walked in. You've only just got one?
We don't quite have the budget for the between, so this is like Department of Conversation beside one fern.
Or the fern in between two guys. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. So also in the last 12 months or so, is it more than that? Time flies. I moved here 4 years ago.
Right.
You're now working with the project.
Yeah. So I've actually been there since episode 1. So it's coming up on. It'll be 2 years in January that we've been on air. Yeah. So I'm the head writer there. Obviously, my main focus is on the comedy side, but it's a real guerrilla TV show in many ways. Like everyone does a little bit of everything. Daily turnaround TV has been a whole different thing for me. So it's been a lot of fun. It's occasionally been really frightening. It's occasionally been really weird. It's the first day job I've had in 25 years. Yeah. I mean, 2 years you must be liking it, or else you'd be gone. Is it good? Oh, it's great. Yeah. It's a wonderful team of people that they've put together. We get left to our own devices, and we're really proud of the show that we're putting out every night.
That's so often the way with creatives, eh? You hear conversations like The Simpsons is the perfect example. How have you been so successful? And they say, we don't take notes.
Yeah.
Meaning those up above leave us alone. It seems that for anything to be successful, the bureaucrats and the managers need to stay out of the way of the creatives.
Yeah, well, that's certainly been my experience. I mean, I'm sure there has been a bit of that going on. I mean, as with anything, it's a flagship show. It's 7 o'clock. It's primetime TV. So I'm sure there have been decisions made above my pay grade. But in terms of what they allow me and my team of writers, and we are mainly working with whoever's in the comedian seat, whether that be Josh or Jeremy Corbett or whoever is in that week, that day. We just do our thing. We have our own office. We're separate from the main 3 building. We're completely self-contained. So we've got our production, post-production, journalism, writing, studio are all in the same unit. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that is often that too many cooks rule. I think particularly when you're working with comedy, and I know the project is a weird hybrid. Yeah. But there is such a big entertainment element of it. As soon as you start trying to throw bureaucracy at that, it can run the risk of kill it. So
I've just been listening to a couple of podcasts in the last couple of days. One, just by chance, they were on the same feed. One with John Cleese and one with Eric Idle.
Right.
And one of the stories that John Cleese tells is he went went to start Monty Python, like back in whatever it was, 69, actually for the BBC, they went to this meeting with this person who could make the decision, and the person who made the decision was like, so what's the show going to be? And he said, as a group of comedians, they looked at each other and went, what's the show going to be? They didn't know. And he went, well, is it going to have songs in it? And they looked at each other. This is in the meeting to get green lighted. And he went, I don't know. They're talking to each other saying, is it going to have songs in it? But the manager of the time, who stayed the head of their department for the full 4-year run of Monty Python, knew they were good writers and knew they were good comedians. So the way John Cleese tells the story is he basically angrily said, oh, we'll just go away and make 13 episodes then. Yeah. You know, and it's like, and the idea of someone who is good at checking numbers, good at managing people, can also control comedy, seems to be an enigma. It's like, let them do what they want to do. You look after the budgets and stuff, but let them do what they want to do, and that's when you get gold. Yeah, that's certainly one way of doing it. The other way is finding someone who can put the chemistry of the team together. I think that can be very important. Obviously, Monty Python, I mean, they were a team already. Yeah. Which is often the best way to do it. Yeah. 7 Days is a perfect example of that. 7 Days is not the first time New Zealand had tried a panel comedy show. There'd been at least 2 or 3 attempts that had just fallen flat. And I personally believe that the biggest reason those shows didn't work was they just had the wrong group of people on screen and off. You know, they tried to look at... and this happens so often in not just television, but any form of entertainment or the arts. They tried to have representatives of 5 different groups, if you like. You know? So you mean ticking the female vote, the Pacific Island vote, the Māori vote, absolutely, whatever it is. Yeah, whatever it is. And I think, I mean, when 7 Days started, they didn't try to do that. Right. I mean, I don't think they failed to do that, but it was just... certainly, you know, from the first couple of episodes, it was like, these are the 7 people we think are going to be best on this show. Right. You know, and they tried a lot of people. They sort of auditioned, did loose runs, but they just didn't. There used to be like a Wednesday night at the Comedy Store in Auckland. There'd be like a mock one, and they'd sometimes find people from there and bring them through. That was slightly different, actually. Oh, sorry. Yes, no, they are still doing those. Yeah, we do one at 6:30, and it's a sort of smaller version. But yeah, it's a testing. It's kind of a test out. Yeah. So any of those young new comedians, you still want to give them a try to see if it's going to work, because they might be brilliant at stand up, but may not be able to pick up on those news. Yeah, events. And it's the different genres. I mean, there are some brilliant stand-ups, both from here and overseas, who have gone on 7 Days and really not come across very well, because it's just not their thing. Yeah. There are people who are brilliant on 7 Days who aren't necessarily the greatest stand-ups in the country, right, but, you know, they've got a comic sensibility. It's also that timing and being quick. And I wonder as well, the relationship off camera. Like, I mean, I used to work in radio, and often the best breakfast host, and I actually think about Jeremy Corbett, and he used to work with Kim on More FM. Always good mates. You always hear about those two kind of holidaying in the Coromandel. And back in the day, I don't know how the relationship is now, but like, Roger and Nick on The Rock, and these guys who are really good mates. Made really good teams. How does that reflect on 7 Days? Absolutely. Particularly, I mean, that core group of us that you mentioned at the beginning, who I guess you can call the originals. The OGs. We've all known each other for 20 years as well. Right. And, you know, we may not go on holiday together, but we know each other. We kind of have an idea of how each other's comedy works as well. We have a respect for each other. And yeah, I mean, we do a live tour, which we're starting off again at the beginning of December. And that's great. That's like, you know, hitting the road with a bunch of your friends for 3-4 weeks. It's a great way to finish the year. So is that a live 7 Days tour? Live 7 Days tour. Oh, nice. Yeah, and you're going to come and do the students in Dunedin? I guess December they're not going to be here. December's hard for us in Dunedin. We've done a couple in Dunedin, and it's a tough sell because that big student market is away. So the biggest shows we've done down here actually have been, we did at least 1, maybe 2 orientation gigs. I remember you doing it at the Mitre 10 Stadium. Yeah, at the Forsyth Borough or Mitre 10. Oh, sorry, Forsyth Bar, but they weren't. We certainly did it in the Mitre 10 stand. Yes, and they were great. Logistically, a nightmare trying to do audio for 7 people in a stadium is really tough. But they were packed. They were great fun. Nice. Are you still guys filming the same way? As a Thursday night takes about 2.5 hours in Ponsonby in Auckland? No, we've moved now. We're in a different studio, which was sort of, but not really built for us. So we're down by the tennis centre in Parnell, if people know Auckland. Okay. But yeah, same thing. We film. We have a live studio audience. Tickets are free. You just get them through the 3 website, and we just go for it. Because I would really, if people enjoy the show, I actually think the live show is 1,000 times better. Yeah, well, it's a different beast, obviously. There's a different energy. Comedy is like
that. I mean, just live comedy has always got an energy that is very hard to translate to television.
Yeah, totally. I remember coming along actually with your parents one night a few years ago, and I think it was Madeline Sami was there. And you know, the respectful people out there may not like this, but she was filthy. I remember some jokes about netballers and various things, and it was just not netballers by name, but just the genre. It was so much funnier, the stuff that came out that wasn't used, which obviously for reasons couldn't be used. Yeah. So if people like the show, they should totally get along to the live filming. Filming takes like 2.5 hours.
Yeah, it's tighter than back then. It used to be a marathon. I think we have tightened it up a little bit. Yeah, and then they need that 24 hours to edit and run it past the lawyers. That's basically it.
Yeah, cool. Now, speaking of your parents, probably most people know your story, but you're not born in New Zealand?
No, I was born in Canada. Born in there, lived in Canada till I was about 7 years old. Moved to the UK. My dad's in medicine, so he basically followed medical schools around the world.
Right.
And then he was specialising in skin cancer and melanoma. So
where else do you come?
Exactly. Yeah. So we came to Otago, and then I was in Dunedin for all my high school and university years. Went away again for a little bit, and then eventually settled in Auckland around the time that we met, sort of 99, 2000.
Oh, okay. So you were down this way until then?
Yeah, I was here for 11 years, I guess. Right. Yeah. So I was here. We arrived here in 89, and I think I left in 98. So.
And your folks back in Canada now?
No, they're back in Auckland, actually.
Really?
Back there, yeah.
Because you and Michelle were doing a fair few trips over there. I thought that was to see family.
It was originally, yeah. So same thing. My father went to Melbourne for a few years, and then went to Vancouver, went back to UBC medical school there for another 5 years, and then got offered a job at University of Auckland. So I came back and... is kind of on the verge of retirement, but don't tell him that.
So family's in Auckland?
Yeah.
Oh, very cool.
Well, my parents are, I've got one sister. She's in Melbourne still.
How do you feel? I was going to say ethnically. It's always tough when you're talking to a white person about ethnically. I don't know how it works, but where's your loyalties lie? I don't mean like, oh, you're an All Blacks fan, but I mean, do you feel Canadian when you're in Canada? Do you feel like a Kiwi? Do you feel outside the society when you go back?
I do. There is a touch of that. I mean, when I do go back to Canada, it's still, even though I haven't lived there for a long time, it still feels very familiar. Right. I mean, I still have a lot of family there. Yep. I still know the cities that I tend to visit relatively well. They haven't changed that much. Places don't. But my home is in New Zealand. It's interestingly enough, though, I do get my back up a little bit. Like all this recent stuff about the Kiwi values that came out of the New Zealand First Party Conference really got my back up.
Are we talking politics already?
Well, no, I just thought I'd bring it up as an example.
Okay, let's go.
Because it was just that sense of, to me, that's when people talk about things being Kiwi as, or that's so, or the traditional Kiwi, whatever. That's about the only time that I do feel slightly excluded.
Unpack that.
I guess. All right, you talk about the traditional, and people talk about like the traditional Kiwi beach summer or Christmas at the beach and so on, and they talk about it as if everyone should know exactly what that means and how it felt, and I don't. I have had beach summers as an adult, but I never did as a child.
Is that because when you came here, you're in Dunedin as well, and Dunedin people don't do beach summers?
Absolutely.
And
there's a good reason for that.
Okay.
And I think I suspect it's the same. You see it very clearly over the ditch when people talk about Australian. If you don't like it, go home. That statement is one. I wrote a newspaper column about this recently, and I actually preempted that by saying, before you say if you don't like it, go home. I do like it, and I've chosen to be here. Yeah. But Kiwi is broader than that, or being a New Zealander, or people. And I think the more we. The more we acknowledge that, the more cohesive we're going to be as a nation. And I think that is a reflection, and maybe, to be fair, my reaction to it is possibly a reflection of the sort of rise of nationalism that you're seeing around the world, of people closing their borders, metaphorically or literally, closing their heads into what they, trying to throw back to an idea of country that as far as I'm concerned, never existed. Maybe it did.
Are we talking about New Zealand now? Or are we talking about Make America Great Again? Or is it all kind of...
It's all part of the same thing. Yeah. So, I because I actually haven't been back to Canada for a few years, it's entirely possible the same thing's happening there. I don't know.
Although Trudeau doesn't seem to be that way inclined.
Doesn't seem to be, but there are. At the
but then look at Brazil
and look at
in the last few days.
Look at us. Jacinda Ardern doesn't seem that way inclined, but it's still, that sentiment is still there somewhere in the
Well,
country.
I reckon. I mean, as you know, worked as a talkback host for several years, so I kind of saw quite a lot of that sentiment.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah. Oh, it's nothing new. Don't make me think
I
it's brand
don't
new.
feel, and I have to be honest, I'm perhaps not as involved in politics as with the New Zealand political scene. I feel like I'm far more involved in the American political scene. I love it.
I'm with you on that.
I don't
actually,
feel quite as involved in the New Zealand political scene as perhaps I was. It doesn't feel to me like it's gotten worse, like that nationalism within New Zealand. And I remember, I'm hearing you a story about what's Kiwi as, and I still stand by this. The only thing we can claim to be Kiwi as, i.e. unique to New Zealand, is actually the Māori culture.
Right.
Because beach summers, they happen in Australia.
Yeah.
Christmas isn't the beach, that happens in South Africa. And in fact, most colonised countries, depending on what hemisphere you have, they actually mirror each other when it comes to things brought in by colonial times.
Absolutely.
Whereas the only thing unique to a country, I'm sorry, number 8 wire 4x2 mentality is in other parts of the world. Go to the outback of Australia is the Māori culture. So that's the only thing we have in this country that is, quote, Kiwi as, unique as.
I completely agree with you. And it's funny, I mean, the people who talk about a unique national culture, who talk about it in the way that I'm talking about it, in the talkback radio way, tend to be white people.
I know, when I say that to that person, they don't like it very much.
No, exactly, yeah.
But I firmly, and look, I don't say that to degrade those people's position and stuff, but I actually think, I'm just using logic. I've got cousins and family in Australia, guess what? They have a beach Christmas. It's not unique to New Zealand. What's unique to New Zealand? Very little. Definitely the Māori culture.
Yeah.
That is unique to New Zealand. It's different from Samoa, it's different from Hawaii, it's different from, Vanuatu. It's unique to this country. It's different from the Aboriginal culture in Australia. It is unique. It is the only thing. Well, I guess there might be one or two little things.
There's the Cook Islands, which have a very, very similar.
Sure, but it is still different.
I get you, yeah.
So I always think when I hear people talk about, the unique side of New Zealand and what's Kiwi as and is actually, that's why I always say I am not Māori. I have no blood in me, but I own the story because I'm a part of the country. And if you're a part of the land and you don't own the Māori story, then actually you're not part of the country.
Yeah.
Because that's, no matter what you say then, now, and the future, that is the story of this country, where it started, how it came through to a certain point and then started to change. But if you ignore that point, then, what is it? You ignore history, you're doomed to repeat it.
Yeah.
So it's a part of us.
And how much better do you think we're getting at that?
I don't feel like it's changed very much.
Okay.
I don't feel like... It's very different moving from Auckland to Dunedin.
Yeah.
The cultural makeup, the ethnic makeup is very different.
Oh, absolutely.
And it was quite a shock when I moved here.
Yeah.
On some levels, I felt like I'd moved to a Scandinavian country.
Oh, see, I know exactly what you mean, because I did it the other way around. I moved from Dunedin to Auckland, and I think maybe I was a little more prepared because I initially, of course, came here as a tourist. We came here on sabbatical for 6 months before we moved here properly. So I had done all the, we'd been to Rotorua, we'd done the cultural experiences, so at least I was aware of that. I do know people who born and bred in Dunedin who, essentially had never met a Pacific Islander before.
Growing up in Dunedin, we had one Asian kid and one Māori kid at my high school. And there was
a high school
of 750 people, one Māori kid, two Asian kids, I think, and the rest were white.
Yeah. Hey, look, be clear. There's nothing wrong with this. It's just, population breakdown is a population breakdown. But what I was going to say is, when you said how is it changing, I'm outside that sort of massively. I mean, Dunedin is multicultural, no question. I love it. I love the parts of this community that are ethnically diverse, but it is not as ethnically diverse as Auckland. So I'm outside a lot of that more intense bubble. Yeah. And what I see in Dunedin is actually really nice, a really nice mix, welcoming, inviting. You do get the odd argument, you don't call it, that's not the Maori way, you pronounce it this way. But I don't feel that very much down here. I felt that more in Auckland. Right. So my experience of coming to a place that seems less ethnically diverse kind of feels to me like it's more ethnically accepting. It's interesting.
Cohesive, yeah.
It's interesting,
yeah.
So, but I mean, you're still in Auckland. What do you see up there? I mean, you're also part of the media every day. So, do you feel it? See it? Is there still that, for want of a less kind of, I'm thinking like a not derogatory term, but a less argumentative term, the racial diversity, the racial acceptance. How are you feeling that in the northern part of the country?
I do think it's certainly improved in my time up there. I mean, it still exists, absolutely. We did a few episodes specifically for Maori Language Week, and the feedback you get on that is completely predictable. You know, you get, God, can you just pronounce places the right way, or I don't know, I don't want to watch TV when there's words I don't understand. But we're getting less and less of that. Possibly that's because of the specific show that I work on,
right?
Which of course is fronted by Kanoa Lloyd, and Josh Thompson is a regular guest. So we are a pretty diverse face of New Zealand right there, which sounds really patronising, but it's just a fact. But it certainly still exists. I mean, you just have to look at Hobson's Pledge, and you know it's still there. The other, of course, the big tension in Auckland occasionally is with the Asian culture, with the rapidly expanding Asian cultures, which I love. I think that really gives Auckland a truly Pan-Asian feel, Pacific Asian, which is what it is. That's where we are. You know? But you get that feedback. You get people. I live in an area very close to me, which has the highest Chinese population density in the country. And I do know older white people who just won't go there.
Really?
Yeah. Well, it's just.
Are you talking out East Auckland way?
No, I'm talking over. It's North Shore actually. North
Really?
Coast, yeah.
So if you'd have said that from my time, I would have said Pakiranga or Howick or.
Yeah. I think it's just in terms of density.
Right. Okay.
There's a big shopping mall there, and it was fantastic during the Beijing Olympics. They put up this huge screen, and they had it streaming 24 hours. But I do know people who just go, oh yeah, I wouldn't go there.
Like not go there as in like wouldn't walk the streets, or wouldn't live there.
Just would have no reason to believe that there's anything there for them.
Right.
I think. Yeah.
Other than the amazing food and interesting culture.
Correct. Yeah. No, there's not a fear of it. I should make that clear.
Right.
But there's just that sense of
that's theirs.
That's
not for me.
Over here. Yeah. Exactly.
That's one of those things I used to hear as a talkback host, which was not about any one particular culture, but often would be aimed at Asians. People would say, when you move here, we need to be one. We need to be one, be a part of society sort of thing. And my response to that would always be, so you want these people, you want to be with these people as one. And the person would say yes, and I'd say, well, go to them.
Yeah.
When was the last time you invited them to your place for a barbecue? When was, it seems that we think this, you think about us moving to a really foreign culture. I don't know, France, even though not really foreign in the way we look, but whatever. The locals making us welcome is going to be a far easier way to integrate into that society, rather than us kind of standing there looking around going, how do I do this? Yeah. So my encouragement would always be to people, you put the hand out and pull them into the community, rather than sitting back twiddling your thumbs going, when are you coming? When are you coming? And then when they come, they say, fuck off.
And one thing we do better than a lot of places I've visited is our multiculturalism is. I'm speaking, I guess, specifically about Auckland at the moment, but it's very visible.
Totally.
You walk down Queen Street, you walk through, a series of Korean shops. You hit the town hall, which is the old English architecture. Then you hit a whole sort of area with Italian restaurants, and it's not that defined. In Melbourne, for example, it is that defined. You go to one suburb,
there's the Greek Quarter.
There's the Greek Quarter, which is great. But interestingly, in terms of, to go back to Maori culture, when my parents lived in Australia, they said one of the problems that they immediately picked up on with the race issue with Aboriginal people over there is that you just basically never saw them. You never walked into a shop or a bank or a meeting and sat across an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander as an equal. You only really saw them in lying in parks, or you saw because they still keep those cultures very separate.
Right.
And thankfully we don't do that. I mean, partially because we just don't have the space. We don't have a space to have two separate sort of cultures living apart.
Yeah.
Which is a good thing, but it also means that it can throw into sharp relief some of the some of the ways that we're failing that connection, which is why, I've been amazed recently with some of the, resistance to the idea that Maori health needs more attention or the welfare state needs more targeted attention. I don't know how you can not see that, because, like I say, it's everywhere around us.
I heard someone say the other day that I think they were actually talking about Trump, but they said it's so fascinating when people who are born on third base think they've hit a home run.
Right.
And I just thought about that compared to what you were talking about. And I'm not saying that the gap is anything like that, but there are a lot of people in this country who have been born at home base and have to go all the way around.
Yep.
And there are some of us that have been at first, second or third base and have advantages that others don't. And the ones that don't, sometimes they might need more coaching to hit that home run, whatever that coaching might end up being.
No, and I thank you for bringing in a baseball analogy. I was hoping we going to get around to that.
You got your Angels hat on?
Got my Angels hat on,
Yeah, it's interesting. And you and I think, bonded quite a bit over a couple of election cycles on politics. For those who don't know, we ran a podcast called The Slightly Correct Political Show, which was freaking awesome. It was so much fun.
Along with Chris Brain, if he's watching or listening.
Yeah, and so that was season 2. Chris Brain came in. So season 1, we did a series of guests, and it was the P's, wasn't it? No, a performer, a pundit, and a politician.
That's right, yeah.
And then season 2, we just kind of had the three of us. There was you with a quote-unquote left-wing comedian. Chris was the right-wing comedian. There was me, supposedly, in the middle.
And then a guest,
And then a guest of some sort.
Yep.
I remember those days really fondly, and I still often think about a particular Don Brash interview we had.
I thought this might come up.
Well,
it was...
we've actually got a little bit. Let's play a smidge of this. He came in, and I don't think he quite knew what he put himself in for.
Interview. What you, Don Brash, is doing is basically a glorified version of lining up outside Pack and Save and
he was
with a job application saying,
interviewing
we would
for
like
the job.
you people of New Zealand to employ me.
That's exactly right.
Would that be a fair fair
comment?
Let me play it to you first of all, right? I won't play the whole thing because it's 60 seconds, but have a listen to this. This is from the 2005 campaign.
Oh, poor Don Brash.
Would you have sent troops to Iraq?
I say this is a diversionary tactic by Helen Clark that's not relevant.
But would you have sent troops to Iraq, Dr. Brash?
The issue right now, today, is about Labor's wasting hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayers' money.
My question was, would you have sent troops to Iraq if you were the Prime Minister?
So that goes on for another 47 seconds. We don't need to go through the whole thing.
I feel bad for him in that thing. And to his credit, after that, he said, so the basic premise was, if you're applying for an interview, if you're interviewing to us for your job, how can you come to a job interview and not answer the question?
That's right. Yeah.
To his credit, he said he was embarrassed by that. Obviously, some PR spin got sent wrong. And then I remember we asked him about his infidelity.
Yeah, his marriage. That came up as well. So it was a
Well, I still think it's a valid question. People say what happens, but politicians' private lives is their own business. Fair enough on some level, unless their private life contravenes or contradicts their public life.
Right.
And I'm not saying that's the case with Don Brash, but the example we gave him was we talked about his. It's been noted, it's publicised, it's not gossip mongering, and he admitted to some infidelity in some of his relationships. And so the question was, how can we, the public of New Zealand, trust you when at times the person who is closest to you can't trust you? In other words, are you going to cheat on us too? And again, to his credit, he went, well, that's a fair question, and that's a question that the people of New Zealand have to answer.
Yeah, I think he did definitely answer the questions, and I think, if you look at what's been happening at the National Party over the last 6 months, we're starting to see that again. I do wonder where the line is, and I occasionally wonder if we crossed it during that interview.
Well, let's be fair. Occasionally you wonder if I crossed it, because I don't think you were involved in much of that questioning. I think that was me mostly.
Yeah, but okay, it was just for the legal minds watching. Because, I do think it's funny coming at it from a comedy point of view. Yeah. I'm obviously looking for the stuff that I can make jokes about.
Yeah.
And quite often the stuff I make jokes about are the things that make me annoyed. Right. That's my way of trying to turn my annoyance into something I can talk to an audience about without just yelling at them. And comedy's always worked like that. You go back to the court jester and
totally
medieval times. That's
the court jester was the only person that could basically tell the king the truth without risk of having his head cut off.
It's where the term "speak truth to power" originates.
Yep.
You know, is that, and so there's that. There are lines I do think when you hit where you just, as a comedian, I have to, and I'm only speaking for myself personally, I have to go, I know I can't go there.
So with that interview, on reflection, where do you think we maybe potentially crossed the line? What do you reckon?
I think potentially with the infidelity questions.
Really?
I think we maybe went a little long on it. I mean, if people want to listen to the whole thing, you feel free to disagree.
Somewhere
with me.
online, yeah.
But like you say, I mean, I do also believe that if he was relatively open to talking to us about it.
I think the beauty, and I mean, maybe it's similar to what we're doing here in the Department of Conversation. The beauty of it is I like and believe that asking questions that other people aren't asking can only be healthy. And I'm never basing anything from disrespect or, like someone said to me, a journalist friend actually said to me when I told them about this podcast, they went, oh, you're going to have to make sure you get the blood on the floor moment. That'll be the publicity. And I went, and walked away and went, it's not what I want to do.
No.
We've got the Flat Earth Society coming in 2 weeks' time.
Great.
And I want them to share the video on their Facebook page. In other words, I want them to be so happy with the interview that we may agree, we may disagree, we may have point and counterpoint, but it's a fair, safe, and healthy conversation.
Yeah.
So much so that they're happy to put it on their page. That's sort of my belief. Like we had a intersex conversation on Thursday.
Right.
That's gone through all the intersex communities' Facebook pages.
Great.
So that's sort of what I am about and what I want to do. I don't think also shying away from those questions. I mean, I take your point on that one. I'll reflect on that myself.
Yeah.
But I still think that if someone's public life is contradicted by their... Let me use an example. And there's no one that I can think of, but someone... I mean, in American politics, you know, all the anti-gay hype from people who are sleeping with male prostitutes. But like on a more minor thing, someone who is like no to cannabis, but maybe they're smoking in their own free time sort of thing. You know, I think those kinds of questions are valid.
Oh, absolutely.
Maybe that wasn't valid. Maybe that's a line. Fair enough.
No, I'm not. I'm actually not agreeing, not disagreeing that it's valid. I sometimes think maybe we just pushed it a little too long.
Was that the one that we talked about Aotearohas with him, or did I do that by myself? Doesn't ring a bell.
It's a few years ago now.
Because
I think maybe it was,
because we talked to him about the Treaty of Waitangi as well.
That's right, yeah,
and I asked him about kawanatanga, rangatira, and he said to me, or said to us, if it was us, that he didn't know what those meant. And my position was, well, surely if you're going to be an advocate for a particular version of the treaty, you should understand the other one as well. And I remember noting that the next day he cancelled a debate on the treaty. Right. I don't know if that was because of the podcast, but certainly being able to say, if you don't understand what kawanatanga is, don't have to agree with it, but if you don't even understand, that's I think that's a flaw in someone's especially when the United Nations says if there is a disagreement between two treaties, then you're supposed to go to the indigenous language to figure it out.
Yeah,
that's what the rulings kind of are. So even if you think it's wrong, you should at least understand.
Oh, No, I completely agree on.
Not to pick on Don Brass, because I remember some interesting conversations we had with people like Colin Craig as well.
Yes, which we probably shouldn't go to.
We're not going to go
quite
there.
Having to throw a lawyer at people. So yeah.
No, but that was fun, and that was different and unique. And you know, there's some things about life moving on that you like, and some things that you're a bit sad. And I guess I kind of go, it would have been nice to continue on with, because we only ever did like 10, 15 weeks, and it was only ever around the election cycle.
It was right up in the lead up to.
Yeah, which means everyone came on, because politicians go to the opening of a paper bag when it's election season. So while some of them might be avoiding me now, I'm looking at you directly. In 18 months, they'll be throwing themselves out.
Oh, good luck with that. Yeah.
But you were known, and I guess that's why all the Uber drivers in Dunedin are thinking you're here for the Labour Party conference. You were known as a Labour Party activist almost. Are you still involved?
No, I'm not. I mean, I have friends in the Labour Party who I will do favours for. You know, I'll do a fundraising show for them, or be part of a debate or something. But I've never been a member of the party. I've never been involved particularly behind the scenes. You know, I've occasionally volunteered my services doing what I do, which is, you know, telling jokes.
Yeah.
And I've done that for other parties as well, to be fair. I've done it for, the Greens once or twice, and a few others.
Because that's where you sit politically as well. Like if ACT came to you and wanted to use your services.
No, I do sit on the left. I think that's pretty obvious in what the stuff that I choose to write and do comedy about.
When you do stuff for political parties, is it typically you're volunteering your time to help? Or is it a paid gig? Because what I'm thinking
is... No, it's generally volunteer.
So if ACT came to you and said, we'll pay you your fee to come and do it, would you be open to that or still not? Because
probably not. Okay. Yeah, probably not. Because... Yeah, I do think you have to stay true. What I have found is I have been far more removed from politics in recent years.
Why?
I think I got frustrated with it. I think MMP frustrates me. Yeah. And I know that I'm flogging a dead horse here. But I find the horse trading that has to go on as part of that system. As a source of material, and we've both met the man. He's hugely charismatic. I really genuinely like Winston Peters.
Didn't you meet him in a pub not too long ago, and he asked you what I was up to?
That was a couple of years ago, I think. Yeah.
He's got a good mind on him, that man.
Yeah.
He remembers.
But watching that whole process again play out, I just wanted to bang my head against the wall. But
what are the alternatives? Because I remember maybe not this election cycle, but the one before it. I think Australia is STV and England is, the UK is something else. They're different, not MMP. And both of those had trade-offs as well, because it wasn't about the way people were elected. It was about that there was enough independence to make no one party have a majority.
Yeah.
Well, so the horse trading is not necessarily, it may be more likely in MMP, but it's not necessarily just MMP because other groups do it as well. So what's the solution?
My personal choice would be single transferable. I think that's a fairer system in many ways, not only to politics in general, but to the voter. It's amazing to me that here's my option. You should be able to tick, this is the candidate and party I want in, and this is the one I absolutely do not want in.
Right.
I'm joking, but this is the kind of thing that's in my head.
Like a +1, -1 almost.
Absolutely.
And everyone else is a 0.
Because I think there's a vast number of people who look at the ACT Party, for example, and just go, how is that there? Because it's a deal.
I'm just wondering the logistics of that. I know it's not maybe serious, but wouldn't you just get all the national parties saying +1 national, all of them saying -1 Labour, and maybe all the smaller parties would end up running the country?
Well, maybe
all the zeros.
Maybe that's how we're going to wind up. Maybe we should give that a go, see what happens.
I've had this conversation before, and that method does exist.
Really?
I don't know where it is. I'll look it up for you right now, but it does exist.
Oh. Damn it. Thought I'd invented it. Oh, well.
And what do you think about the current government? I know you have friends and stuff in that department and in that party, but how do you think... Well, it's interesting. I thought this morning, because I thought we might talk politics, and it's interesting that the right is often seen as fiscally responsible and the left is often seen as not. And there's just been a big surplus announced. And my instant reaction was, of course there's a surplus. It's Labour. You think about Michael Cullen, surplus. And now it's Labour, surplus. Now people will argue they've got a surplus because of National Before Them's responsibility. I'm not going to get into that, but how do you feel about how Labour's going at the moment?
Like I say, I haven't been quite as involved, so I'll take it away from specific policies and surplus and economics, and just say what I think we've seen in the last, are we coming up on a year? It's been a year? Yeah. Is we've seen both parties have struggled with not being used to what they're doing now. Labour have made some mistakes. Individual MPs have made some mistakes.
Yeah, that's been prevalent. Both sides, actually.
Both sides, yeah. And so individual MPs have made mistakes. As a party, they've made mistakes. And I think the underlying reason for a lot of that, but particularly the individual mistakes, is that these are people who have not been the ruling party for a decade.
Right. So they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, I looked it up, and I don't have the facts if you happen to pull them up, but I believe there's 3 or 4 current MPs who have ever been in the ruling party before.
Do you mean 3 or 4 in
Labour?
In Labour.
So if you look at, if you think about the clearing out that happens during all those leadership battles, all of that, people retirements, it might be 3 or 4 members of caucus rather than of cabinet, rather than of their whole party. But you look at that and you see they are just getting used. Claire Curran, seeing as we're in Dunedin, I think that was a perfect example of that. Those meetings that she had as an opposition spokeswoman for the arts would not have been a problem. Meeting someone in a cafe, having a meeting in an office that you haven't totally 100% prioritized, just wouldn't be a political issue.
Yeah.
But when you're the minister, they are
different rules.
Yeah. And I think we're seeing the same thing happen on the other side, which is you're seeing a national party who aren't used to being in opposition.
They're still coming across like we can push through here. We're in charge.
Well, I think they're actually coming across as believing that. I think they need to learn that being in opposition is more than just opposing everything the government suggests.
It's one of those things that, and I want to keep my powder a little bit dry, but it's one of those things that I want to ask both leaders.
Yeah, great.
And I've had conversations with both Simon and Jacinda's office, and it's probably not going to happen this year. But one of the things I want to say is, and this is really based on an American system, right? And I heard a conversation with someone not too long ago, and they were talking about Bill Maher, the comedian, right. And Bill Maher going, I want there to be a recession.
Right.
And he wants there to be a recession, so basically Trump falls and fails. Yeah. And there was some commentary on that from someone who was not a Trump supporter, saying we should want our president to be as successful, even if we hate him, we should want our president to be as successful as possible, because that's good for all of us, whether we're a supporter or not.
I'd make it even wider than that. We should want our country to be doing the best that it can across the board, regardless of who's running it.
Yeah, totally.
I don't think who's running it should make such a big difference in certain areas as it does. Yeah. And particularly, the American system is a very clear division. There's a very clear division, and I think I don't know what's going to happen with the midterms. I know you're going to be talking about it next week. But people, will often vote with their wallets, and like you say, the economy is actually doing pretty well. So I don't know if there's going to be a big swing against Trump. What I am seeing in the lead up to it is a shift in both parties. You're seeing Republican candidates running for Congress who are at least putting themselves across as more moderate than the guy who's sitting in the Oval Office.
Medicaid is the perfect example. Yeah. Ted Cruz saying pre-existing conditions, no one will be left behind. But just to finish off that point about the leaders here, and that's fine. So what I want to do is say to Simon Bridges in particular, what are you doing to help Jacinda Ardern and the Labor Party make our country great again? Because rather than just being in opposition,
that's what
you Simon Bridges, you whoever else political party I've got here, you should want this person to be successful and this party to be successful, because if they're successful, it's good for all of us. You shouldn't just want them to fail so you can have a turn next time.
And then please feel free to take the credit for it. You know, if National came up with a policy that they presented that was wonderful for the country, but that's the equal and opposite that I want to say to Jacinda, which is, and how often are you meeting with him, and how often is Simon bringing in ideas that you're saying, hey, you know what, your policy, that's great, we'll support it. Both ways. And right down the ministerial ranks, But to go back, just my point about the midterms, it was, like I say, I think we're going to see a shift in the Republican Party away from the really hardline right that we have been seeing, and I think we're going to see more of a shift to the left from the Democrats. I think you're going to see more of the Bernie Sanders style of let's divest the wealth even more.
It's time for America to sort out their political system. And that sounds really arrogant, saying that from the bottom of the world with someone, other than when they say, when America sneezes, the world catches a cold. So we do have a vested interest, but not a lot really, compared to the people who live there. But the past 30 years, the right has won the popular vote once. Right? And that was the second term of George W. Bush when the Iraq War was at its peak.
Correct.
And so that means for the past 30 years, America has been a left-wing country, but they've only run the country half the time. So they need to sort their system out, and they need to figure it out, because everyone talks about the polling being wrong at the last election. The polling wasn't wrong because the polling was based on the popular vote. The polling said that Hillary Clinton would win the popular vote by about 3 points. And she did.
That's what happened,
So actually the polling wasn't wrong. People were interpreting it as the college vote. And that's not. So actually the polling was wrong. And I think that we have lots of things we could do to improve our system. I actually think voting should be compulsory in this country. I think in New Zealand it should be compulsory, but equally on that voting paper, there should be a no confidence vote.
Right.
So you still must vote, but you have the option of picking not. I think voting should be easier. It should be online. It should be all these things as well. And I actually tell you that I believe that, and I'm not saying this from a person who supports the left necessarily, but I believe that if every citizen of every country voted, most of the Western countries would be left-wing countries.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I guess maybe it's predictable that I would. I don't necessarily agree with compulsory anything, but I completely agree making voting easier, making it more accessible, making it more attractive. And I think I do think that's the problem. I think that the lack of voter turnout anywhere in the world is it's not laziness. It's not lazy millennials. It's not, people who just can't be bothered going down. It's a total dissatisfaction with certain systems.
I think it's both.
It's that idea of, well, what difference is it going to make?
I think it's both. I think it's an element of laziness. I mean, I used to have this conversation, as again, I say for the third time on Talkback, where people would say, oh, if you don't vote, you've got no right to have an opinion now. And my response would be no, because an actual thought through, I can't vote for anyone, right? So in other words, I've worked as valid as a vote, which is why I say if you have a no confidence vote on there, then you can have a thought through, all these people are dicks, no confidence. And I hear what you're saying, because actually, in general, I'm pretty anti the compulsory anything as well. But I just think that, it's compulsory to vote in Australia.
Yes.
It's compulsory to be registered to vote in New Zealand. I just think that if we want we always talk about fair representation. And if everyone voted, MMB wouldn't be a problem, because it would be a fair representation even if there was horse trading.
Yeah. Okay.
If there was a fair representation because everyone voted, who would have any complaints about the government?
Yep. I would.
Do you know what I mean?
That. Yeah.
It might be unfair, it might be unrealistic, but if I was going to change something, it would be that.
Yeah.
And perhaps the offside rule in rugby. That'd be the two things if I was Prime Minister that I'd try and do. So what else have you got going on at the moment?
Well,
I've got a stand-up. Okay, so here's a question.
Yeah.
I do listen to a lot of podcasts. I listen to a lot of comedians' podcasts, and a lot of them always talk about writing for sitcoms kills your stand-up.
Right.
Because you don't have time to do other things, and all your creativity goes into one thing. How are you going with stand-up at the moment?
I'm not doing as much of it, mainly just for time. And also, I was trying to do both for a while there. Do all of my regular work, now daily work, plus do all the gigs that I was normally doing. And it was just burning me out. I just wasn't having days or nights off at any point. So I've pulled back on it a little bit for that reason. I do get their point, is I am writing jokes and lines and comedy all day. So sometimes trying to write, but I'm writing them for other people's voices.
Yeah, sure.
For a different format, for a different audience, for a different time slot than I normally perform at.
Is that something you've had to learn, writing for someone else?
No, not really. I've always kind of been able to do that.
Yeah.
I've always been a very fast, and not just for comedy. I was one of those kids who I was terrible at internal assessment, but I nailed exams. I could always just go in and go bang, 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 bang. That's that. And so that hasn't been an issue. It obviously helps that the voices I'm writing for are people I know.
Yeah, sure.
I've never been employed to write for a comedian that I don't know personally.
Right.
But yeah, no, it definitely makes it harder to then go home and write 10 minutes of new material for yourself.
So the International Comedy Festival is about March of next year, give or take. Have you got enough time to fix something up for that? Or
no, I won't be doing a show. What I am doing in February next year, my wife, Michelle Lecourt, and I are doing a national tour through Arts on Tour, mainly small towns, 27. Actually,
I was talking to Michelle not long ago over Facebook, and she was like, well, if we come to Dunedin, are you coming to Dunedin?
I need to check the itinerary, to be honest with you.
Because she actually said maybe me and Jeremy could both come in.
Yeah.
Which would be a blast.
This is all just falling into place in the last week or so, really. So we will be doing a national tour. So I will definitely aim to have written a fair chunk of brand new stuff for that. What I am at the moment, one thing that the writing does do is it makes those comedy muscles fire really quickly. So, I've always done a fair bit of ad-libbing on stage and come out with a lot of my material starts as something I just come up with on stage. Yeah. So that bit of it is actually working probably better than it has for a few years.
Do you know what I learned about you the other day, having known you on and off around for 20 years? Can you Google Jeremy Elwood? No, Google Jeremy Elwood song.
Oh.
I saw a song you performed at a comedy show, and I never, ever, ever seen you perform with a song before.
Oh, that's,
well, I don't know if this will be the right one, but
yeah,
maybe it is. Let's hear a bit of this.
I guess a lot of people haven't actually. Yeah.
We won't get kicked. Who are we looking at here? No, we won't get kicked off YouTube for this, will we? Skip through a bit, get into the guitar. Let's have a bit of a song.
That's right. Yeah, there you
go.
There's a few of them.
Ad news out there. There's so much conflict. I think the world could use a love song.
I'd never seen you do a song before.
This is where I started doing in stand-up.
Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You in front of the Concords?
No. See, I started well before them.
So they suck.
And no, they're terrific. But
here we go.
Turn up. We all need someone to hate. New Zealand's got Australia. Canada's got the States. The Scottish have the English. India's got Pakistan.
I look a lot healthier in that video too than I do now.
When is this?
We all hate Afghanistan.
2012, I think.
Well,
No, sorry, I'm looking at the views.
But they're headed by Tibet.
Yeah, so
I hadn't seen any of it before.
no, well, when I started out in Dunedin, as you know, we the way the stand-up it was sort of a circuitous, cyclical route to getting to where I started. I was doing a lot of sketch comedy, and we were running a weekly sketch comedy show in the Octagon.
Right.
And the sketches kind of just kept getting more and more elaborate. We kept adding in sets and props. So somebody had to go out and talk to the crowds. So that's basically where I started doing traditional one guy with a microphone stand-up.
Nice.
But at the same time, some of the sketches were musical, and I took some of those and turned them into comedy songs. It was also when I started doing gigs outside of, because those were very much within, 80% of the audience, student crowd, very friendly. When I started doing gigs outside of my then comfort zone in smaller towns, in country pubs, in some of the rougher pubs around Dunedin, the guitar was a very useful thing to hide behind.
Right.
And also a really useful thing to, I don't mean people were throwing stuff.
No.
I just mean, but also a
safety barrier.
A way to cut through. Because back in those days, a lot of places wouldn't put a cover charge on. They wouldn't necessarily advertise the gig. I mean, there were times you would literally turn up at pubs and no one in the pub, apart from the owner, knew it was a comedy night.
Right.
They were all just there for their regular Thursday drinks, to get pissed or to have a meal. So the guitar was a really good thing for cutting through that. And then as things progressed, I got a little tired of all that stuff. I got a bit tired of hiding behind things, and I wanted to challenge myself to do more stand-up. So I started, I would go from doing, my initial sets were pretty much all songs, and then I would do 2 songs, and then I would do 15 minutes of stand-up and end with a
So you're
song.
basically the New Zealand's Billy Connolly.
In a way. But then the other thing that happened was there was a kind of boom in musical comedy, highlighted obviously by Flight of the Conchords. And suddenly it wasn't a point of difference for me anymore. So that's when I moved more into harder edged, I suppose, topical and political comedy, because that was a niche.
And do you think that would be fair to say that's what you have been known for, let's say, the last 10 years, especially the political comedy?
I would hope so.
Yeah.
Topical maybe rather than specifically political.
Right.
Because I think that, that was something I wanted to do, and it was something, it's the kind of comedy I've always admired watching, like right from when I first became aware of this.
And who was that? So you're, 15 years old, and who were you watching? What are you listening to?
I guess when I was 15, it was probably, there was Tom Lehrer. My dad had a lot of Tom Lehrer's stuff, which again was where the music come from.
Mm-hmm.
And then, when I really started getting into it, it was George Carlin, Pryor, Bill Hicks. It was mainly Americans, to be honest, rather than a lot of the Brits. They came a bit later, but yeah, it's a funny performance. It's a weird job to do, and particularly in New Zealand. it's not quite this way now, but when I started, there was such a limited number of opportunities of gigs that you could do, that you really, if you were trying to do it full time, you really needed to have a point of difference,
right?
Because they didn't want to book 3 white guys with a mation talking about politics. So if you look at that group of comedians who came out at that time, I toured for 3 years with Terry Frisbee, Chris Brain, and Rhys Darby.
Right.
And you just look at the four of those. You had me doing, borderline political stuff. Chris was a very dark comic, very cerebral. Terry was very much sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And Rhys, Rhys is Rhys. Yeah,
he was insane. He was very much dinosaurs around the stage.
And that was the lineup show, and it did extremely well.
Yeah.
And it took us overseas. But that was the kind of thing. I think these days you do get a little bit more, call it what you want. I occasionally call it monotony throughout shows. You will get a lot of the young comics are I find very similar.
Right. Because they're seeing and imitating, or just that's what's happening?
I think it's just that's what's happening at the moment. And it's like anything. It's like music, you know. Certain things become popular.
So when you see something that's successful, that's what you end up, no, maybe not imitating, but that's where you gravitate towards.
Yeah, or it even just comes out from, I mean, comedy is a community, so you hang out with like-minded people.
Right.
And you tend to gravitate towards people who have similar ideas and attitudes to you, so that happens.
You and your wife Michelle do a lot of writing. I see quite a bit of on stuff or various locations, your articles.
Yeah,
and sometimes you write together.
We do write. So we write a weekly two-header column for stuff. It gets published in various newspapers, not the ODT, but Christchurch Press, Southland Times, Dominion Post, and so we do that every week, and then it goes up on stuff when they remember to put it up, which is most of the time.
When did you, I was going to say, because I have a very early recollection of Michelle, when did you first meet Michelle?
It was when I moved to Auckland, so I guess 97, 98, because I moved up in, was it 97? I can't remember the exact dates, but I was travelling up quite a lot, doing shows regularly, and we met around that time.
And do most people know you about how you got married, and where you got married?
Oh, it's not a secret. Yeah. So we got married. It's 7 years ago now in Vegas.
Yeah. By Elvis?
No, but in the little white wedding chapel. The thing is, we only decided to do it on a Tuesday, and we did it on the Thursday. And you need to book Elvis at least a week in advance. Right. So we did actually ask, but we couldn't get Elvis.
My first memory of Michelle is 1987.
Right.
And the reason I remember is she was hosting What Now? And it was the day of the final of the Rugby World Cup. And I can remember specifically her wearing a French rugby jersey.
Right.
And the host going, Aotearohas, of course, French. And so they had one of the hosts in the rugby, All Blacks, and one of the hosts, and Michelle.
Yeah.
And that's I mean, obviously I was, at the time I would have been watching it anyway. I would have been 12, 13. But I specifically remember the marrying of the word Aotearohas with the French jersey with the day of the...
Oh, you should save all this for when you get her down. She'll come in and do this. Yeah, no problem.
So last question about that then. If you're travelling together, who headlines? Who opens for who?
We will probably literally toss a coin or just make a decision. It often... when you do a double headliner show, which is what these are, it often becomes really apparent after two shows which order works better, and it's not a case of who's better than the other. It's just a case of what's the better flow for the audience.
Is there a natural kind of the way someone ends might be better to start into the other person sort of thing?
Absolutely, and sometimes somebody might be ending with something that you want the audience to think about for 10 minutes over an interval, or they might be ending with something that you want them to be thinking about as they drive home.
Cool.
But initially, I mean, for the first couple of shows, we will probably literally toss a coin.
As most husbands, I thought you'd say, well, whatever Michelle decides, what we're going to do. Hey, I think we're probably approaching about midday.
Yeah, I think we're getting around there.
So, and you've got other stuff to do, other people to visit here in Dunedin.
Yeah, I do.
Does this feel like home when you come here, seeing you were here for so long?
It's funny, I was having this conversation with a really good friend of mine last night. No, not really.
Yeah.
But it still is very familiar.
Right.
It still feels very comfortable.
You know this place.
It feels to me, I don't know, but I suspect I feel about Dunedin a bit the way that people who just came down and did an extended period at university, for example. I mean, and the reason is that it doesn't necessarily feel like home. A, I've been away 20 years.
Yeah.
And B, my family don't live here anymore.
Yep.
Most of my good friends are living elsewhere. There's a small handful of hardcore who either stayed here or moved away and came back.
Right.
I mean, I still really like the place. I love the fact that Dunedin has retained its identity.
Yeah.
I mean, it really does. It feels the same. This is what I mean. It feels familiar. It feels like it did when I lived here.
Yeah.
But my home is with my my wife and cat, in Auckland, where I've been for two
Cat's
decades.
name is?
Satchmo.
So if you're on Mark Maron's podcast right now, you'd now speak for 20 minutes about cats.
About cats, yeah.
We're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. So project is weeknights on 3 at 7.
Yep, 5 nights a week, 7 o'clock.
Anything else that people need to know about for you coming up?
Keep an eye out for the tour. Those dates will be, and we really are covering a large part of the country, and it's a really fun tour because you're doing smaller places. You know, we start in Aotearohas, and we end in Whakatane, I believe. You know, and so keep an eye out for that publicity. For that'll be going out soon. The other thing that I will be involved in this summer is. Auckland is getting its first ever professional baseball team.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the Auckland Tuatara play their first home game on November 22nd.
Against who, if it's the first?
Against the Brisbane Bandits.
Are they becoming a part of
They're
the Australian?
part of the Australian League. Oh. So kind of like the Warriors and the Breakers, they're playing in the Australian competition. So we're hoping they're more like the Breakers than the not.
Where is the field going to be?
It's eventually, this year, it'll be a temporary spot in Te Aratu, McLeod Park. But as of next year, they're moving to QBE Stadium in Albany.
Right.
So tickets have just gone on sale for that. It's aucklandtuatara.co.nz.
So QBE Stadium is home of North Harbour Rugby.
Yes, I believe that. Yeah, it has been. I'm not quite sure what their situation is.
But summer league baseball anyway.
Yeah, we'll be moving in there, and I'm going to be doing some ground announcing for them and roaming the stadium. And I'm a big baseball fan. If you hadn't noticed, so that's exciting for me. So
funny, I've got New York on actually.
Yeah, I know, I noticed that.
It's because I'm a poser, not because I'm a fan. All right, so people want to find out about the 7 days tour, I guess 3.co.nz, and your stuff, jeremyelwood.com?
Yes, it is,
.com?
Yeah, jeremyelwood.com. I'm not great at updating my stuff, but it is there. Facebook, Jeremy Elwood. Twitter, Jeremy Elwood. I don't hide behind aliases.
All right.
7 days live tour is through 3.co.nz/7 days live, I think, or just Google it. You'll find us.
Excellent. Thanks, Jeremy.
Thanks, Pat. Nice to see you again.